was 3 years old before I found out my name wasn't Don't. And I didn't know really whose family I belonged to. I began to walk at 7 months, and the neighbors said, "You're not my kid. Go home." And I got lost. I didn't know where was home. You ever get lost? How many here have been lost in your life? Yeah. My mother took me to Colorado, Denver, Colorado. Went to a department store, and there was this escalator going up and down, and I was about 7 years old, and so that really intrigued me, and I was going up and down and up and down, and one time I was going up and they were going down. And when I got down, they were gone. And I was a little disturbed, and I made my little baby, everybody knew that I was lost. The cop took me to the police station and said, "It's going to be your..." No, he didn't say it was going to be my home, but he did say, "We're going to find who you belong to." And he gave me an ice cream cone. No ice cream, but he gave me there was ice cream in it. and it was nice, and within a while my mother came and picked me up and appropriately designated where I would be, that I had to stay next to her. As I grew up, I found that I was responsible for my name. I knew my name was David Milton Ray Hayes. I knew that. And not many people know about that part, but I knew what each one of those words meant. And the last one, Hayes, I knew that if I didn't perform according to the Hayes Code, my dad would remind me of the code when we got home. In the washroom, he would clean up my act. And it was a warm experience. They had heaters in those days, and we call them beaters today, but nevertheless, he said, "I don't care what other kids do, David, you are a Hayes, so you will act like that." I said, "It wasn't my fault, I got hazy on what this..." No, he said, "You know what I'm talking about." So he impressed that on me to know who we are. And we see in John 3 that there was a man named Nicodemus, that to that point in time, he had done everything a person could do to be justified by his good works. He knew the Bible by heart to that point. He had followed the Jewish religion to the point he was a member of the Sanhedrin, which is the top dogs in the country. And yet there was a hole in his heart, a place where he didn't know. He didn't know that he was but a rotting carcass on wheels. And he knew that he was going to die, and he wasn't sure that everything he did was enough. So he came to Jesus by night because he's a very busy man, and so was Jesus. It was a nice thing that Jesus met him when he was open to him. And he said, "I know who you are, Jesus. You are God, the very God." That's what he said. Nobody could do these miracles except he be God. Now tell me, how can I be changed from Nicodemus to your family? How can I become a family of God, part of that family? We had 2 good daughters that we adopted. Anybody here adopt somebody, or you have been adopted? And we were in front of George Vandergriff in the county building down here. And the judge, we'd done all the paperwork and we had worked really hard, and the judge asked our youngest daughter, "Do you want to be a Hayes instead of a Hartford? And do you want the benefits and the responsibilities of being a Hayes?" She said, "Absolutely. They cook good. They give me lots of clothes, take me good places, take care of me. Yeah, I'll take that." Then he turned to my older daughter, Robin, and said, "Robin, would you like to be a Hayes instead of a Hartford?" And she said, "Well, what's in it for me?" He said, "Well, all the things that you have now as a Hartford, which is a negative factor in our life, will be changed because you'll become a haze and everything the hazes do, and you'll inherit their experiences, and you'll inherit whatever they have when they die. She said, I get what they have when they die. And I said, yeah. Well, I'll be a haze then. It became very, very clear to her that was what she was doing, the family she belonged to, was not adequate to fill her needs. Nicodemus knew that, and he said, in his heart, and Jesus read his thoughts, and said, in order to be part of the family of God, you must first be born from above. You must be adopted into the family of God. And how do I do that, he said. How can I be part of the kingdom of God? And Jesus said, we don't know where the wind comes from or where it goes, but we know that it's blowing because it affects us. How many here have had hay fever in your life? Isn't that wonderful stuff? And you can tell the seasons better than anybody else, right? And when the wind blows, you know it because it affects you. And Jesus said, when you're being affected by the wind, you know there's a wind. You can't see it, touch it, smell it, or hear it, but you know it's there when it happens. So likewise, being born from the Spirit is being realized in your heart that you are inadequate in your own abilities to stand before a righteous God. And we see the writers telling us that you can do whatever you want, you're not good enough until you've been born from above. He said, marvel not. First you have to be born physically of the water. How many have been know that there's water that comes before the child, right? So that he says, born of the flesh, and then born again of the Spirit. Wow. And then he quoted to Nicodemus, which I think is the most beautiful verse, and you can say it with me. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. He didn't come in the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved, that they might know in whom they have believed. They may know that in Christ they are safe. Not in their works, lest they should boast, but by grace they were saved. I think of the thief on the cross. I relate to him. The thief said this, remember me when you come to your kingdom. He told Pilate, when Pilate said, are you the king of this world? Pilate said, no, I'm not the king of this world. I'm the king of another world, the other world. Some people call it the shadow world. Some people call it another dimension. Different words for what's happening. That this is not it. This is just a journey that we're on. For you see, God knew before the worlds were formed who would be part of his family, who he would be adopted into in his family, because they would trust him to do for them what they couldn't do for themselves. They could be justified and know in whom they have believed. Be persuaded he's able to keep us through our whole days and forever safe. I love that song, Safe Am I in the Hollow of His Hands. Safe am I, knowing that he is our Redeemer. We see that Jesus in 1 Corinthians 15 says there's two families in the world. Begins at verse 45, tells us the first family is the family of the first Adam. The second family is the family of the second Adam. It was a life-giving spirit from above. Wow. Whom would that be? I think his name is Jesus. God in the flesh, doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. We see that in 1 Corinthians 15, that there are two families. In John 14, as he was ready to leave, Jesus said, don't worry. I'm going to go away and do something, and I will send my Spirit to dwell in your heart. Now, science is a wonderful thing. I am a scientist by desire, because I want to know what's true. I want to know that not necessarily what I thought was true is true, but what is true. Not what other people think is true. I want to know in my heart that it's true. I've been told a lot of things that people thought were truth, and maybe to them it was, but I want to know what's truth. And I find that the truth is what sets you free and directs your path. In the Old Testament, they had the law to go by. Paul said that was just a schoolmarm to get you to the place where you could believe that Jesus loved you. This I know, because the Bible tells us his great love sent him to die for us. Now, I personally, there are not many people I'd want to die for. If I were to die, hairdresser, I'd dye anybody's hair, but I'm not into the dyeing business. I really don't want to give my life for somebody that took other people's lives or did something horrendous. Let alone, some people would die for a good man, but there's none righteous, no, not one. So there is only one that could do for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. I was teaching a Catholic Bible study years ago for about a year and a half, and the place was packed, and this building's about half again this size. And I made a mistake. I didn't know the Catholic doctrine. So here I'm talking to people, I don't know where they're at. And the priest told me, don't teach your doctrine, which I later found out was not good. But teach the doctrine of the Bible, just the Bible, and no Catholic doctrine, no what I was doctrine. I said, okay. And that's what I did. In Romans 3:25, it says that he became the propitiation. I like that word in King James, propitiation, for our sins. In those days, and in today, there is no redeeming or cleansing from sin except by a blood. A shedding of blood, there's no sin that can be removed. How many remember the Ark of the Covenant lessons we went through? Remember, the mercy seat was the top lid, and across it each year they had to put blood of a lamb for the sins of the nation. And if you sinned during the year, as a person, you had to take a lamb or take a goat or something and give it to the priest, and the priest would pray and resolve you of those sins. And you keep a clear conscience. But once and for all, Christ put his blood on that Ark of the Covenant in the other dimension. This is symbolic of the other dimension, the eternal. You see, this world is here for just a moment, and it shall all pass away, and we are not made for time. Time is made for men, so we can figure out, why am I feeling like this? Well, it's because I've been on the calendar too long, and time marches on. How many find time marching on in your physical being? Yeah, we're very good examples of what time is. Well, in Romans we see that we have a history that we can read in the 8th chapter. He said, God foreknew those who would trust his children, his son Jesus, for their salvation. He foreknew, and he set a course for your life. And the course he set for you is different than I or different than somebody else's. So don't chew bread after somebody else did, okay? I have to say that you say don't chew steak, but I can't chew it anymore, so don't chew any bread if somebody else did. How many know what I'm talking about? Let it be a truth within you that counts. And remember, it's changing. We are changing all the time. Things we hear either resonate, they stick, or they don't. And it's okay. You don't have to believe what other people believe. You are an individual child of God that he is teaching a particular route to. It's like going to L.A. I'm going to meet you at the Hilton Hotel, okay? Now, some of us would be going down like Larry would probably get to go down I-5. Everything I've heard about him, he's just perfect. His sister Sharon says, He'd never done anything wrong. Now, Jay is a little different story. Jay, he's going to go down 99 because there's a lot of good-looking girls as waitresses there in the restaurants, and they need a little love. They need to be known that they're appreciated. And then we look at Art over here. Art, you get to go down 101 because you love the scenery, and you like to see those artichokes growing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's beautiful. But Clay and I, we get to go down Highway 1. How many have been on Highway 1? Woo, woo, it's like a roller coaster all the way, yeah. But the destination is the same. It's a different route. It doesn't mean that what you're on is wrong. We need to keep our eyes upon the goal and realize that God has a plan for your life. It's different than anybody else. But the end result is to let you know that he loves you. And he has given his son that you can have life and life after death. In John 4, God sent his Spirit to guide us. We were in Oakland one time delivering meat, and I drove through this tunnel in our meat truck we're delivering. And Jen said, we probably ought to stop and ask where this address is. I said, Jen, I know what I'm doing. About a half hour later, we're driving through the same tunnel. She said, don't you think you ought to stop and ask? Jan, I know what I'm doing. Okay. Well, another half hour, we're in the tunnel. And I said, Jan, she said, don't you think we ought to stop? I said, yeah, okay. So we stopped at the first store. I went in, I said, do you know where this address is? She said, yeah, it's over here 1 block. So it was there all the time, but I didn't know how to get there. And I had this lady with me that was smart enough to say, let's stop and ask, but I was not going to give in. And how many realize that's my spirit in life? I'm just going to make sure. Well, I've gone through a few tunnels. I want you to know something really experienced that I saw in the Living Bible. Not the Living Bible, but the Amplified. Jesus is talking to his Father, and he said, you have prepared a body for me to be in the earth. And that body was developed in the womb of Mary in Bethlehem. He came forth. After he died on the cross, he had finished what he came to do for you and I. Then his new body came into action. People whom he knew didn't even recognize him. His cousin, he walked with him for all the way to Emmaus. And as he broke bread, his cousin and friends said, wow, now I know who you are. He disappeared. In the upper room, they're for fear of the Jews, they've gathered, locked the doors, locked the windows, and there he is. And he has fellowship with them, and then there he's gone. He controlled his body. His body didn't control him. How would you like that, huh? Yay, yeah. And so what we see in the mirror is not what you saw, or you see me, it's not what you saw when Maureen picked up this picture. Jan did. I always slept upside down on my back. So this is, but people that knew me then, what happened to you? You used to be cute. And listen, we're going to be more beautiful than you ever thought, because all sin has been washed away, all temptations are gone. We are going to be ourselves, whom God has created to be his child forever. Aren't you glad that we belong to Jesus and we belong to that family of God?